invite people, however that might look for you, to follow along on these guides, or you can just take notes and watch us. And you can't hurt the guides, so plenty of playing around is in order, I think, afterwards too. We have found that Firefox as a platform for Microsofty people is one of the best. Each browser has its own little quirks in how it processes the information. They all work, some a little bit better, or some, like when you try and do backspacing or going back to previous pages, will not be happy about that. I think Clare has discovered that Safari works the best in a Mac environment. Okay, so here's Discover Life. I think you can see my cursor here. This is where things start. I'm going to emphasize this a lot as we go along, but these are matrix guides. So these are very different from dichotomous keys, and you need to keep that in mind. You need to break out of the dichotomous mindset and move into the matrix mindset. So we will present that kind of information as we go forth, but it's not, if you're using a answer the first question and go from there kind of approach, that's not probably the best way to use these guides. So in Discover Life, there's different ways to get to the guides. One is you can go up here to ID Nature guides, and they're embedded in there. The easiest way is to click on the bumblebee, sort of a secret shortcut here, and you'll come to this Apoidea page. We will, if we have time, talk about this great bee species section that John Pickering and John Asher have put together that gives you access to lists of bees of the world and for particular countries and taxonomic information. But we're going to concentrate on identification guides today. So again, you can just scroll down on this page to get to the ID guides. But if you click that link, the jump to, then you'll come to a page that largely features all the links to all the different individual guides. There's about, I don't know, maybe 100. So if you look up here at the top, you'll see by clicking that link, you have a really nice means of creating a link to all the guides at the top of your browser page. So keep that in mind, and that's the easiest way. That's the way we do it here, is just link to that, click in. Now you're here. You have a whole variety of choices of different kinds of guides. Usually the workflow would be, I've got to be what genus it is, and we're going to cover that when we start doing microscope work. It's going to be learning the characteristics of the bee genera. And then after you figure out the genus, you would jump to one of the identification guides for a species level one. So, yeah.
We have a question in the chat that got lost. How do I get to the genera? So can you show that again?
To the genera?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we're not on the genera. We're just looking at the guides right now.
Okay, I think they just meant like scrolling down maybe.
Oh,
click the link.
You can scroll to where I am right now. You can scroll down that page, or let's go back up. It's not far actually. See this thing? Click here to jump right to the identification guides. That's the internal jump. It's all the same page. So hopefully that helps out. Otherwise, you can see on my screen what we're looking at, and later we'll send out links that will get you right back to this place. So all the guides are set up in the same format. So I'm not going to open up the genus guide or the genera guide right now because it's more complicated and we're going to be spending a lot of time there. I think, what will I do? I will open up, how about, there's so many guides. How about the Coelioxys female guide? So sometimes if there's a lot of species in a group, we will split the males and females apart. And sometimes we, if it's a smaller group, or we just had started out that way with the bombus, we have males and females in there. So on the right-hand side in this particular part of the form are questions. So we would call them questions with states of questions in there. And on the left-hand side is a list of possible answers. So in this case, species, and sometimes if you have males and females, would be the species and the sex, And in some cases, you might have some different taxonomic categories in there. The very basic thing here is that as a matrix guide, there is no reason that you have to start with question number 1. Now, we present things in a order that we think makes sense, but as you get more and more experience, you can jump right down to a particular character that you see in your specimen, and you might click on that right away. What you have is a set of, for a character, you have the states of the character, and you can click on one of these after reading them, and you will see, in this case, a 10, a green 10 next to it. That gives you an idea that, well, 10 of the, in this case, species have been scored for having that character. So if you look over here, the first one, only 1 species has been scored for that. So you already have a little bit of information about how useful or not useful a character is going to be. If it's an unusual one like this, then you're going to go right to an answer. And something like this one is going to be less discriminating. You can click on one, or it's like, well, I'm not sure if it's this character or it's this character, but I know it's not that, and that one. You can click on more than one. And this is the approach you should be taking. You should take the most conservative approach if you don't even understand what the abdomen S6 shape means. In a case, don't even answer that question. Or if you do, you can play around with it and click on the characters, click search, and then click them back off again just to see what happens. So you can be very exploratory here. So I've chosen those 2. I've clicked search. All these search buttons are exactly the same. And now I have a smaller subset. Not that much smaller, because we clicked 2 characters of the abdomen S6 shape that are quite, that are not very discriminating, 10 in that one and 7. Those can overlap too. So a single species could be scored for both if it's ambiguous in its presentation. And you may also score it for both, which we have done here, because I'm not sure if it's this or this. It could be either. You want to do that. You don't want to say, well, if I had to guess, it would be, if you use the word, if I had to guess, you're already on the wrong path. You want to start broad, and if you come up with an answer, your confidence goes way up. Because once a species drops off this list because of your guessing, you never get it back. So you could answer everything else correctly for that species. But in a situation where you guessed about something, you've already, lost the game, and you've lost the power of a guide like this. So if I click off that character, I could say, oh, what happens if I click that off? Now I'm down to that list of 7 species matching that. And I can go like, oh, that's interesting. That gives me some information, but I'm still gonna play conservative. I'm gonna keep that on. So you can click things on and off as many times as you want until you hit, which we'll get to, the simplify button. So I'm gonna say, I don't like that character, but oh my gosh, the leg color, I really can tell that this is a really obvious one in my specimen. They are red, and I'm going to, or actually, in this case, sorry, brown or black. And that is going to help me out. So it decreased it from 17 to 10. I might know something about the subgenus if I'm a taxonomic expert. I could click on one of those. For example, I could say, well, I know it's in the subgenus Coelioxys. And now that takes me down to 2. And you'll see this simplify button there. And so at any point you can hit the simplify button. And what that does, I'm going to broaden this just a little bit more and use a different subgenus. So now I have 6. Okay, now I have 6 possible things here. I can hit the simplify, and what that's going to do is it's going to take these species and it's going to recreate a new guide. And what it's going to do is it's going to eliminate from this first page any question that no longer separates out these species, and it will bring up a bunch of hidden, more detailed questions that pertain to the list at hand. So in these guides, we only present a few characters, important characters at the very beginning that help you split out your species groups well. And then by hitting simplify, you're going to recreate a guide, bring in new, usually more specific, like how to tell these different species apart pair by pair. And so you can keep doing that as you go along. Additionally, you'll see there's check marks here. So I can say, well, this could be any of those. I'm not really clear, but I know it's not Coelioxys sayi for whatever reason you want. Like, oh, I know because it doesn't have, a character that I know. Only Coelioxys sayi has the indented Clypeus, for example. So it's not that one. So I'm going to drop it from the list. Now I'm going to hit simplify.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can we ask you to try to zoom in on your browser a little bit, see if it still formats well? They're having trouble seeing the font size.
Seeing the font size. Zoom in on my browser. Okay, let's see if I can do that. It's usually plus.
The whole guide available.
There we go. Well, some of the guide will shift off, but looks like it's better. That's probably better, right? Okay. It looks like it squeezes it nicely. All right, so we're back here. We've hit simplify. So you can see Coelioxys is on the list, but it's not checked. If we really want to clean up that list, we can hit search again. And now it's just the 5 that we've looked at. We can now, as in most cases, you're actually working in a particular region. So we could say, oh, I'm actually in New Hampshire at the time. You can see there's only 4 species that are on this list that are characteristic of possibly being in New Hampshire. So when we're using these guides, this says state or province where bee was collected. That doesn't mean that there's a record for it. It just means that it possibly could show up, in this case, in New Hampshire. And so we score very broadly. If a species is in North Carolina but not Georgia, we'll probably add Georgia to the list of possible states or provinces where the bee could occur, because we're still gaining a lot of information about the distributions of bees. So we're going to be conservative. If you're on a border between 2 states, you could click the two adjacent states. If you're really getting exploratory, you can click as many states as you want. So now we're down to 4. Why not hit simplify again? We've created a new guide to just the 4 species. And if we look over here, we have a set of questions. I've got an incoming call, which, how can I kill that call? We're going to just let it ring. But it's probably the president, but I'm going to ignore it. So here, for example, is Rufitarsi, Moestus, and Porterae. Very similar species, and we're covering them in a character that wasn't available on the front page because you don't need to see all these details when you're first looking through the guide to get to a specific ID. But when you're down to a list like this, yeah, you want to see a character that goes into lots of detail about the often tricky sets of characters for species. So in this case, here's one that covers 3 species, although it's lumping Moestus and Porterae together. But, oh, interestingly enough, there is a Moestus versus Porterae character here. And you can see that when we get down, usually when we get down to a species level, we're often bringing in some comparative information that we might not include, because comparative information assumes that you have access to a collection or other species, other specimens, and that's not fair, because a lot of times you're just starting out and you don't have access to a collection. So we assume at the beginning that you don't, but when we're dealing with one species versus another, and often tricky, we'll sometimes include comparative information because that might be helpful if you did have additional information. They seem to be very popular today, but we're going to let that roll through. The guide continues the same. When we're doing these two, you could have started here, but usually you would look at something up further up down the list. And so if we looked at this character, the presence of a median ridge down the rear of the tergites, or S6 in this case, now we're down to those three that we were dealing with. We can hit simplify here. And we're really just dealing now with two questions, because this clade of species is hard to tell apart. So in this one, we're going to say, oh, well, when I read this, I can see clearly that it's one of these two. And if I go then down to this one, I'm going to say, well, it's clearly Porter A in those cases. There's our answer. But I'm going to unclick these and pretend that, and gosh, this happens all the time. Like, okay, these three species, even though I have all this information, I'm not really super clear. I read these descriptions and I'm not sure I see the little tiny hairs on the side. I'm not sure about a lot of things sometimes when you're doing bee work. But we have up here a set of 3 additional bits of information that can be useful. One is we can click on map. So a lot of times, so we have, as you can see from this map, the 3 species are colored differently. Moestus, Porter A, and Rufitarsi or Tarsus are seen with different colors. And you can see that the green and the blue are pretty common and the yellow is pretty uncommon. So one sense of that is that, oh, well, all else being equal, I'm much more likely to find a green or blue specimen than I am a yellow one. So Moestus is the least common of all these, and so it would be the least likely on your list. So you would, use that as a weight of evidence in there. You can also, so as you use these maps, you'll find that you can click on them and, oh, look, it's something that we collected, that you can bring up the information of the individual collection record. You can look at dates and other kinds of things that might be embedded in there that might help you. If you look on that one, this is part of John Asher's work. He's just saying that Rufitarsis is recorded specifically in New York State. If we go to something like that one, we're up now in Ontario. We have American Museum of Natural History's data. Everyone has a different format. It all can be listed here. We welcome additional data sets to map. You can't download this data, but it's all available for mapping. And as you can tell, we're really cavalier about what fields are included. Now we also can look at some thumbnails. It's like, oh, I'm interested in seeing some pictures of these different groups. So this is simply thumbnails that we have available for these different species. It's just, they're just all put onto a screen. You can page through them, and that may help clarify, like, oh, this totally does not look like my specimen, or it does. You can click on these and blow them up to get a closer look, and often dive into a lot of the in-depth detail too. You can also do the compare images. So now I've got the 3 species. I can see the 3 separate maps up on top, and you can see clearly that Moestus is the least common. I can see a set of pictures in columns now for each of the 3 species, and then you can go from there in terms of hopefully divining some of the differences between this tricky set of species. Over here, additionally, after exploring that, perhaps you can click on the name, and you can do this at any time, or you can do it as a pop-up window if you wanted to, but it's the same thing. We have a species page that John Asher and John Pickering have helped co-create with a lot of good taxonomic information in here, and you will see, again, map, pictures in a bigger format, and then it should bleed down into literature that we have scanned in, and we're constantly looking for additional literature. So if you see a species account and the literature is not there, you have it. We will take that and put it up on to the species page. So you can really get into nitty-gritty because we're trying to get a lot of species accounts onto Discover Life. And so each of these species would have the literature in here. Sometimes we have so many pictures that you have to click on the thumbnails section or the slideshow section to see all the pictures that we have rather than have the large formatted ones. Those are all available too. So that's how we have been talking about Coelioxys here, and females in particular, and we went through one workflow for an identification. This is how they all work. So I'm going to emphasize a couple things. One is don't guess. So if you don't feel comfortable with a question, skip to another one. Think about your favorite characters or unique characters, and you can jump right down to those and often get an answer in very short time. If you have so we'll hit, if you go up here, you can hit restart. It restarts the entire guide. So we're back to square one. If we hit search button, so these search buttons all do the same thing. We should, it's down here, you can see it's trying to do things. It will pop up eventually the original list of species again. But you can see that a lot of times we have a whole series of states of a particular character. Don't hesitate to say, well, I'm not sure about this character, but I know it's definitely not that one. So you could click all the rest, and sometimes that becomes that helps eliminate a species over here. So the fact that you can't be absolute about which one of these characters, and sometimes these characters are overlapping in their, it might be a size character, or it might be that a species sometimes presents ambiguously. So we would have, if we had done our job right, scored a species that presents with an ambiguous character to several of these, and depending on the character, that can take different forms, so that you can also score broadly here, or click broadly, like I'm not sure if it's this or this, but I know it's not that or that. That's useful, right? Because it will eliminate probably a couple things. But if you have absolutely no idea what this is about, then just go to the next question and keep going through until you have just done the ones that you're sure about. You can hit simplify at any time. And so if we hit it now, we have a much longer guide. You can see these are jumps to the different sections or to the different characters within the guide. We have a much larger list here, but sometimes, after you do this for a while, you go like, I know there's a super special character that's hidden back there. I just need to jump to that. And you could go down here. For example, Banksy and maybe one other species has this weird scoopy rim, which has not been, Sei is listed. I guess it would be, but it has a different character. All right, I'm getting into too much detail. But on this character, so sometimes you can use the guide like that. I know that if I see a Coelioxys and it's got an upturned rim edge, that's a rare character, and I can figure out what the species is right away. I don't need to go through all those questions. I can just jump down to the particular question, and that'll be useful. So you'll find these kinds of shortcuts with time, but I'm emphasizing over and over, don't start with question number one and start guessing at what the answer could be. You're not supposed to use your, best judgment and just pick one state of a character, like, well, this one's the most like it. You can do that as an exploratory process. See, it doesn't match because we've already narrowed it down to 2, and neither have that. And there's no harm in doing it and turning it off, But as you go along, to be firm, you would want to bracket your answer widely if you're unsure, or not do this one at all, or just click it on, click it off to explore what species drop out in that kind of thing. So that, in a nutshell, are the basics. Now I'm going to show a couple more features, and then we can go to questions here of guides that are less apparent. So if you go look at the top here, so there's restart, so we can hit restart anytime. And so we're going to restart, and so here's all the blanks again, and I'm going to hit search, and there's my original list. And again, you can click off, if you have insider knowledge, you can click off any of these species as would be considered as part of the guide. But at the top here, if you click menu, now, if you had the proper permissions, this is where you would modify the guide, but nobody does unless, they're working with us. So you can do whatever you want here. So a couple features here can be useful, particularly as you get along. So if you click on differences and you clicked on, say, Banksy and Coturnix and hit submit, it's going to do a comparative thing. Any character here, abdomen S6 shape, that differs between the two is going to show up. If a character is the same between the two, it's not going to show up. So what that means is, like, you can have another way of considering two species that might be difficult to separate, and might find some more information about how to separate those two. And you can add more. It could be 3 or 4, but then it gets maybe clunky that way. And so here's Coturnix versus all others. So the others are here. Here's Coturnix, a pretty unique species. There's your Clippius shape thing, rim scooped up in Banksy. Oh, but Coturnix does not have that. It shows differences in femur color, and it shows differences in the state list, which it almost always does, because any difference is going to be a matter. There are different subgenera and so forth. So that can be useful, particularly, again, as you evolve in your abilities to use guides. Additionally, if you just want, so we have the same two things clicked here, right? So we could look at all the characters. So it's not going to just show the ones that are different. Like, for example, here, they both have the same medium ridge state. It's just showing you every single character, if that's something useful, which it may or may not be. Then you can always hit reset, and it clears everything out of there. Most of the rest of this is not useful to the average person, except for this has button. So as you get along in your journey, you may be interested in, like, I don't really know, about this T6 median ridge and pitting pattern stuff. I would like to learn more, but I want to be confident that I have if I were to get some specimens, that I would be able to see these various states. So what this does is, if you click has and the character, it's going to give you a list of all the species that have this particular character. So if we do that, we see there's 3. So you could then look at these 3 and get a sense of what this median ridge absent, wide apical margins unpitted, otherwise pitted, what that means, and try and discern that basically on someone's collection of known specimens. But all these 3 could have this character, or could have something that could be considered that character. If we want the best specimens, if you had access to a collection, to understand that character, you would want one that is only scored for this character, which means that it's the most clear. It's not also scored for any of these others. It only is scored for that one. Let's see what happens when we do that. And we're down to 1. Okay, so what that means when we had the has button going on here is that 3 were scored for having this character, but only 1 is scored for only having that character. So if you had access to Coelioxys texanus, this character right there would be the, if you want to understand that, this is the species that would most likely present that the best. Because a lot of times you're using the guide in reverse to try and figure out the parameters of these characters. You know, like I don't understand what a T6 median ridge is. Well, I need to look at some specimens maybe, or work with someone. And in this case, you can, if you had access to specimens, you could look up Coelioxys texanus in this particular case to see that character the best. If we flipped to this one and we did only to see who only has that, none of them have that. Okay, none of them only have that character. If we go to has, which means that there's not one species that has that is not also scored for something else. So alternatus and hunteri are scored for this presence, but are also scored for some of these others. So there's a lot of, we try to overscore, we call it, so that you're less likely to make a mistake. If we'll do that in cases where we think, you know, I could see where someone might call this particular species having this character. So we'll also score it for that, which is different from, say, a taxonomist who has intimate knowledge of all these characters and might finally divide these things into a character that only that the average human could not ever see. So, and you can see here, indeed, these two species are different enough that they warrant a quite extensive set of explanations about how to tell the two apart. So obviously, if you have something like that, and even says difficult to separate and subtly different, like that's the B problem right there in a nutshell. All right, I think that I have gone through the guide basics. Claire, do we have a bunch of questions or any questions at all? Or do I can show some species stuff, but go ahead.
We have one question that I was saving for you.
Okay.
It is verbatim.
Got
I can only get maps with 3 or 4 species, even though I've only picked 1. So what's up with that? And if you need more information, I can unmute.
I'm not quite sure what that means there.
Okay, give me a
moment. I'm gonna unmute everybody and
that's
give you power to unmute yourself, so you know, be responsible with that.
Okay, I'm going to, while you're doing that, Claire, I'm going to take people to the global mapper because that's not part of a guide, but it is a very useful way to, so I'm going back to Discover Life, to look at the nuances of distributions. So I go back to Discover Life, and up here it says Global Mapper. So this is a utility that lets you define the maps in a much more rigorous way. So up here, if I want to see several species, I just type them in. Tegulaire versus Lasio. I shouldn't have typed so much. Glossum Cressonii. And I can keep typing additional things. And now when I do that, you get basically the same kind of map we just saw. And then below here is all the information about who has collected what and what the numbers are in their database that are being expressed up in that map. And as you saw, you can click anywhere on the map and it will zoom in. And this actually, interestingly, these numbers will also change to be smaller as you go into more and more of a detailed area. Additionally, though, you can do things like you can center on a country. You can use latitude, longitude coordinates to, I only want to, this is useful if you're creating maps to cut and paste into a presentation. You can set a latitude and longitude coordinate and a map resolution. The lower map resolutions, topo maps, right now, I believe, do not do much of anything because the topo maps have been taken away. But for these other levels, you can zoom into a map at a particular point and what am I trying to say? A particular point and resolution level. And then I'll get back to Claire's thing in a second. You can set the map widths. You can add individual points or limit them if you want. You can limit the database. Like, for example, you can just look at John Asher's points on here by typing AM and H, if you knew this, B's, or your database. If you have your data are up here, you can limit it just to your database. So now we're just looking at state and provincial records for those two species. You can do a variety of other things that are pretty self-explanatory, so I'll let you play with that. Claire, what's your question?
You might have just answered this for Matt, but with regard to the global mapper, is there a way to exclude John Asher's state center?
Yes. So here we could just add a minus sign in front of the centroids for John Asher. There's a couple ways to do this. So right now it's everything but John Asher's database, which is state and provincial and country, if you're at that level, centroids. In addition, if you look at, if you get rid of this limit databases thing and hit submit, what happens when we do this? Somewhere, here we go. See, it says right here, drop points from country, state, and county centroids. So that would globally get rid of things that just map to the center of a geographic unit, meaning that was not collected from point data. So if we do that, and also throws you apparently into the ocean, but we can scooch back over here and you can re-find your way back to, in this case, North America. By the way, there are species from around the world, and it's useful for exploration of those too. Okay, any other questions, Claire?
Yes, Hess, if you want to jump in and ask your math question, now would be the time.
Okay. Oh, hi, Sam. It's Hess. So I think I'm
Oops, I have my speaker off. There we go.
When way back, maybe 10 minutes ago, when you were trying to show us how the map worked, you know, I was trying to find just one species and I got like 3 or 4 colored dots. I think I'm not getting how to use the map, and I think that's going to be a problem. I mean, I just put in, just say Bombus impatiens,
Right.
and I had to go all the way back to Discover Life because the menu on the site that I was on wouldn't give me make a map. So
okay,
is that true? You have to go back to the beginning. So I did that, and I got a bunch of dots, and then I tried to make it bigger, and what happened is I got a place in Vermont that had it with coordinates and everything, and that's not what I was looking for.
Okay, so there's a couple things going on. One is you can use what we just saw, click on global mapper and enter your species that way.
Yeah, that's what I did. Yeah.
Okay, so here also another way is if you want to do Bombus impatiens, you can go to, this is useful in terms of spelling of specimens names. You can go to Bombus impatiens and it has type aheads. So there is a, I'm just going to click on impetulosus because that sounds interesting. I have no idea what that is. Oh, it shows up as a basic an Asian group. And then you can click on the map and go in from there. Now, your Vermont issue is the fact that you clicked on a space. So if I click away from a dot, it will expand. If I click near a dot, it might pick up the dot, right, and give me the information of the point. So if you need to, when you're doing your exploration of magnifying the area to get closer and closer, you can't be adjacent to or near a dot because it says, oh, you want to see what that record is, that kind of thing. So
yeah, I know what happened. Yeah, because I was doing it in the ocean, but then as the thing moved in, it was no longer in the ocean.
right. So sometimes when super crowded sort of situations, you have to move to an ocean or the Great Lakes or something so that you can get it to a low density enough area so that you can now drill in to whatever the landscape level is that you're interested in your region.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay, yeah, all right. I think I saw what happened. But it
Okay.
looks like you have to go all the way back to the beginning to use the map, and you put in a species, so it's a different operation, in other words.
So again, there's lots of different ways. If you hit the species page, like if I click on the Bombus impetua species page, which doesn't have much in it because it's, we're not doing much in Asia, although the taxonomy is there. The map is always there, and you can just click on that to go in that direction. From a guide, you can click on, anytime you click on a species name, it'll take you to just where we were, and then click on the map there.
Really?
Go in. You can also pop up maps. You can also open up a different browser tab and have something just there for maps. But anytime you have a clickable species name, it takes you to the species page for that species, and there will be a map there.
Okay, well, I'm gonna have to play with this thing. And
it is a play around thing because there's lots of avenues in there. I'll show people the since there's not tons of questions, the species page. Okay, I'll come right back to those questions. So if you saw what I did, which I did rather quickly here, if we go to the Apoidea page, okay, so that's basically the basic page. There's a couple ways to get to this too, and we click B species. That's the list that John Asher and Pick have co-created, and it's set up the same way, but it's a taxonomy thing. So if you're interested in like, well, what are the species known from British Virgin Islands? You can see here are those 15 species. And you can look at all these different taxonomic categories, and you can combine them in lots of different ways. And it's extremely useful sometimes if you have that kind of question to be able to extract things using the Apoidea species list. Also, John has really spent a lot of time curating a species list for the world. So this is usually where most people go to get the most current information. There's exceptions because different people have different philosophical strategies about what a species is, but largely I think John's list is going to reflect what most people are thinking. Finally, really importantly, if you really are getting into the literature and you're like, oh, what is this species? I don't see it listed in any of the guides, but it says it's from, the United States. It might be synonymized, or there might be a spelling difference. And John also has really spent a lot of time collecting those. And you see what I clicked up in here is checklist. So the checklist is something that, unsurprisingly, is a list of all the species in the world. And importantly, there are all the old names. All the synonyms are off to the right on these. It's an incredible amount of work, including the proper spellings of the names and the authors and things. But if you get a weird bee, a weird bee name from the literature, you can just do a find in here. And so find in this page, and like, I don't know what it would be, 10U if flora or something. And so pretend that I was looking for that. And it's like, oh, Andrina tenicula is now considered to be Andrina aciculata. So a lot of times we have these questions like, what is that name? What is it? Is that a valid species or not? This is the place to go to do that. One-stop shopping for that. Then of course you can click on the species here and see if that matches. So here it is. It's a largely European with maybe something from Russia, Siberia up there too.
With 2 questions in stack.
Okay, so let's go to the questions.
So Melissa Caspary asks, or I should
Unmute. If we collect a specimen.
Oh, sorry, I'm gonna mute myself.
If we collect a specimen that is an anomaly to the records, what is the process for notifying someone about the new collection record?
Got it. So there is no official process. You can alert myself and I will. So I would want to know, particularly if it's a new state record or something, because what I would want to do is expand the guide state list to reflect that. And then secondly, John Asher is always interested in those kinds of things because he's maintaining these state and country lists kinds of stuff. And he also will, under lots of circumstances, work with you if you're interested in getting that published. And he'll also let you know if it's probably not worth getting published. And so that would be kind of the process. And, you know, there'll be questions like, what, you know, we probably need some evidence if you want to be frank about it. Like, okay, well, we probably need a specimen or a picture to validate that. You know, it depends on the crazy level. Like if it's many states away, it's like, probably need to see that one type of thing versus something that's just nearby in a nearby state. Is there another question?
Yes, Keith, you can.
Oh, hang on. We'll get this right, Claire.
Yeah, we'll figure it out. Thanks for working with us, everyone. Keith, you can unmute and ask your question.
Hello.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, Sam. Can you or are there plans to be able to overlap bee point data on the global mapper to plant data, say nectar sources?
Yes-ish. So it depends on what you mean by overlap. So if we go, let's say, I'm going to go back to the main page on Discover Life, and I look up, I don't know, Andrina cressonii, common eastern bee species. So, oh my God, look at all these crazy synonymies there and headless bee pictures. If we scroll down, you'll see that in Discover Life are host records for Andrina cressonii that were recorded from label data from somewhere. So you can see, here's the, so I should backing up. Discover Life has lots of data from lots of different species groups, including plants. So here we go, Viburnum prunifolium. If we click on it, you'll see, oh, look, there's a map of that species, and often for the botany people have been working on that. Oops. Now, what did I do there? Okay, so we're back again. And so you can see these are a list of plants that Andrina cressonii has been collected on, and it's a lot. So that's useful, but you know, the problem with a lot of the floral data like this is that is super broad. You don't know the context, you don't know what else was blooming, you don't know if it was a male or female usually, although sometimes by clicking these numbers, you can actually see the record. Here we go, here's the record. It's from CUIC, what the heck? Oh, I think that's Cornell. And there's Howie Ginsberg. We have an adult male in this case, and he gives you dates, and it tells you it was on that particular species of willow. I don't know why that expires all the time. Browsers. So, Keith, I don't know if that completely answers your question, but that's what we got right now.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we have 2 more questions. Is there a way to get a species list? I forgot to unmute. Can you mute yourself?
Got it.
You can just repeat what I say to you.
Oh, but I think that's just muting our speakers. You can, everyone's hearing what we say.
Okay. Okay, there we go.
Okay.
Somebody give us feedback on that, please.
Up.
Oh my gosh. Is there a way to get a species list at the state level?
Okay, so if you want a species list at the state level, several states, but not that many actually, have published state lists. John Asher is the source for state lists from his perspective, like, because he keeps state lists and he would be the best person to work with on that. There is no, the information from John's whatever iteration list is available, as you saw, as centroids, but and you can get that, but basically you would end up needing to go through all the species pages or figure out something clever and computery to generate a list from after the fact. So the best way is just to talk to John.
Okay, this is our last question, and we have 5 minutes, so we should wrap it up. I have host data in many of my records, but it is not in this list because it is just in the notes, not a mappable field. Can we add host plant field to USGS_Bs?
Probably best thing to do is email me about that. Yeah, let's just figure that out offline.
Fantastic. Matt, we will send us an email.
Okay, can I just say one last thing, Claire?
No.
Really? Okay, so next time we'll be using our fancy U.S. Forest Service, thank you, Craig, scope, and we're actually going to be looking at specimens under the scope, and we're going to start introducing some of the taxonomy, the characters, what they look like, and going through the genera guide genus by genus and as the possible, I'm hedging here because we can change things as we go along, but that's my idea right now, is that we're just going to start looking at specimens under the microscope, and that would be a good way to familiarize you with things, and then you can ask questions about can you show me the blah 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 on that genus. But we're going to go into immediately start into the details, and I'll send everyone out a cheat sheet for Eastern bee genera too. Okay, thanks. Claire, we done?
Yes, the one last thing is, as a reminder, email me with questions and comments and concerns. I will be sending out a follow-up email with